Hello, welcome back to All for Women's Football. Yes, it's been a while since I've kind of been in the hosting seat. It's been weeks, I feel like, or months since I've been in the host seat. As you see, you've got two brilliant people with me to talk all about the Frauen-Bundesliga this evening. With me, there's obviously lots of talking points around Wolfsburg, Bayern, and other new league leaders in Frankfurt as well. So we're going to cover all of that just after this. There we go. I always find when I'm watching the intro play, you kind of get different reactions to people backstage. Some people nod along with it. Some people are kind of vibing along to the intro. I love it. It's brilliant. Anyway, welcome to the channel. Everyone kind of watching along with us as well. Get all your thoughts in as we go, and I'll bring this on screen as we discuss through it. But Liberty, thanks for coming back on. Firstly, how are you doing over there?
I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. I'm really good.
I'm sure we can work out why as we go through this show, that's for sure. There might be a certain player that gets a lot of hype on this channel as we go through the chat. Adriana as well, thank you for joining us. How are you doing over there?
All good here. Cheers from Munich. Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely no worries at all. And something's had a reference already here. I have no idea what that is.
But Game of Thrones reference.
Right, okay, there we go. I've never seen that, so that'll be why I don't get what that is. But hello to everyone who's in the chat as well. Right, we're going to start with Wolfsburg versus Bayern, obviously, because that happened, the big game over the weekend. And I've put in the title that it was or on the tweet, sorry, that it was a bit of a shock result. And I've kind of put that with a question mark, and that's what we kind of want to dissect first as we go through this. So, Adriana, welcome to you first on this one. In terms of, was it a shock, do you think? Because I want to talk about Wolfsburg's season in a bit more detail in just a second, but that result on its own, was that a bit of a surprise? Did you expect Bayern to win that one?
I actually did initially think that Bayern would win it because of the run they're having, 44 unbeaten games in the Frauen-Bundesliga, which is impressive, and also because if you see the context in which Wolfsburg went into this game, they have been like 50-50 for every single game. You don't know what you're gonna get from this team. They had a few big changes during the summer with 3 of their main players leaving, with Eva Pajo, Lena Oberdorf to Bayern Munich, obviously, and also Dominik Janssen in defense. So yeah, I think there were a lot of question marks going into this game, but Wolfsburg definitely did surprise me, especially their teamwork in defense against the ball, which I think ultimately gave them the upper hand against Bayern.
No, absolutely. I definitely want to dive into some of the, as I said, the specifics around Wolfsburg at the moment. But Liberty, when we were talking about this earlier on, you kind of said that it was potentially more what Bayern did wrong than necessarily what Wolfsburg did right. Is obviously that is clearly obviously how you think. That's what you said to me earlier on. But if you just want to expand on that a little bit in terms of what your thoughts on the game were, because I said it before this, Bayern were on a ridiculously long unbeaten run. I can't remember the last time they'd lost to Wolfsburg. It felt like it was a couple of years ago in the league potentially as well. So there was that to look at. So again, was this kind of a shock result for you, maybe?
Yeah, definitely a shock, as in I didn't think that necessarily it was going to be a Wolfsburg win. I thought maybe a 1-0 Bayern win. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be sort of what we saw last season with Bayern just kind of running away with the game. But I did think that, yeah, it was more of a what Bayern did wrong compared to what Wolfsburg did right. I don't think necessarily Bayern either changed too much about their approach. Kind of you don't want to going into a big game like this, but I do think Wolfsburg just seemed to have the answers that they may have not had in some other games this season. And also, I think at points this season, Bayern have gone behind and then sort of rallied together and still got the win and kind of scored lots. But I think if you're going to have a sort of same approach against someone as big as Wolfsburg, who are going to be so hungry to win, that you kind of can't afford to have that. And I think that's what happened. I mean, the first goal coming within 5 minutes or so, maybe first 10 minutes, say, can't remember actual proper time, just kind of knocked them off their sails. I don't think they expected it, and they just couldn't really get back into it. And for everything that they sort of didn't mess up with, I don't think it's necessarily a thing of like they messed up big time, but just sort of knocked them off their sails too soon, that then there was no answer. And Wolfsburg's defence, as has been referenced, was so good that it just kind of was never going to happen on the day.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and especially obviously when the Wolfsburg goal goes in so early. I was out at the time actually, and I was looking at it thinking, like, it's fine. I think Bayern will turn this back around, but Wolfsburg get the second. I'm almost just like, what? Especially after something that we will talk about a bit later on, obviously in the Champions League, and it's kind of in reference. And Adrian, I'll throw this over to you. Do you think there was an element of potentially Bayern having? I know Wolfsburg also played midweek as well in the Champions League, but Bayern potentially having a more, I guess, physical game against Arsenal, maybe that, although it was an exceptional win and an emphatic win, that might have taken a little bit more out of them going into such a big game like this one.
I mean, maybe it makes a little bit of a difference also because Bayern had, I think, one less day of recovery because Wolfsburg played one day earlier. So that definitely does play a little bit into it, but I don't think that was the only thing that made the difference in the end. As I said earlier, I think Wolfsburg had this surprising element that they switched their defense line to a back five, which they have rarely done in the past. They normally play with the back four. Sometimes also Hegering or Janina Minge going in the center and playing from there. But you could tell, and Bayern coach Alexander Strauss also said it after the game, that they were surprised that Wolfsburg chose this approach. This is why Bayern also had a lot of difficulties especially in the first 15 minutes to get in between the lines, because Wolfsburg almost set like a trap in between the defense and midfield part. Every time Bayern went into these spaces, they were right there and attacked them and won the balls, which resulted in Bayern not finding any solutions to get close to the goal. And on the other side, of course, it played right into Wolfsburg's cards that they got this chance out of nothing, that Jovana Damjanovic played this made this mistake, which you can't let happen in a big game like this, because you will get punished. And of course, we also have to talk about Vivian Endemann, who the way she finished with her age, I think that was amazing what she did. But yeah, I think that played into Wolfsburg's cards, because then they could sit back a little bit, rely on their defense, which really worked well in comparison to many of the other previous games, and then relied on their counter attacks, where they are also very strong with players like Svenja Huth or Jule Brandt, who are very fast and can, of course, then also create chances through them.
No, absolutely, and I definitely want to highlight, obviously, the key players for Wolfsburg that performed well, obviously, in this game. But I want to throw this liberty over to you, because Lucky's comment here mentioning, not to think that set pieces play a huge part in Bayern's play. And I think, you can look at that, obviously, with Vingestotti and Sembrant as well, obviously, and obviously Eriksson when she's in the team as well. They do score a lot of goals from set pieces. Bayern, and whether they're more reliant on that, I'm not too sure. But do you think that was potentially an area as well that, from set pieces, if that's maybe not clicking for them as much, that they're not as much of a threat in front of goal potentially?
I mean, I'm not sure I'd say they're reliant. I think they're still very creative and can score from kind of open play. But I do think that when a game is going to be as tight as we know a Wolfsburg Bayern game is going to be, that it can play a big part. And I think they probably did lack in the ability to score from set pieces, not for want of trying, obviously. But I also think then you've got to flip it on the other side and say Wolfsburg were very good at dealing with them. I mean, the corners, I thought Möller Frooms had a very good game. And when, as the comment says, Wolfsburg also good aerially, when everyone's good in the same sort of place, you have to just be the better. And I just don't think that was Bayern on the day. I think Wolfsburg just kind of had them down. And if you can't go knocking when kind of the opportunity is presented to you, then it's just going to be hard.
No, I tend to agree with that as well. Before we kind of get on to Wolfsburg's kind of overall start to the season, there's been a bit turbulent. There's been a lot of online chat about this. Adrian, you kind of just highlighted Enderman there as well as a standout. Is there anyone else you kind of want to highlight in this game as someone that kind of really stood out and performed on the day?
I would say definitely Marina Hegering in Wolfsburg defense. I think she had a lot of really good tackles. Also, if you mentioned the aerial duels, I think she was one of the key players there, alongside Alexandra Popp, who got a lot of balls cleared per head. I think of the free kick by Clara Bühl, where Alexandra Popp just stood there and put it away with her head. So I definitely think that those two players made a big difference. Obviously, Endemann we already talked about. She didn't start in the last game. Was chosen over, for example, Linette Berenstein, who came in later, which I think was a good choice because she did a lot more like defense work and in general worked a lot against the ball. So I think that also was a good tactical decision from the coach.
No, absolutely, and came on and obviously scored as well. Not long after that one as well. I mean, Liberty, same question to yourself. Really, anyone that stood out for you in this one?
I mean, I'm going to echo all the decisions. Also, thought Linda, have I pronounced that right? I thought she was pretty. Thank you. I thought she had a good game. I think Bayern's wingers are tricky to deal with, and I thought she was quite excellent. Also thought Lynn Wilms also had a good game. I think if you can kind of shut Bayern's wingers out of a game, then you've probably had a good game purely because they're just really difficult. And yeah, I've already said Möller Frooms, so I thought she also had a really good game. I think at times this season, maybe even going back into last season, she's not looked as confident, as sure as herself. But I thought this game was probably the best I've seen from her in a while, which I think is key. You want a goalkeeper who's confident and sure of themselves going into a big game like this. So yeah, I'd say her as well.
No, definitely, I tend to agree with that from my own observations as well. And it's interesting because it kind of leads me on to my next point around Wolfsburg, because we're naming players here, and like for people who maybe don't watch the leagues, that these are very good players we're naming here. So Andrew, I'll start with you on this one in terms of there's a lot of talk around Wolfsburg at the moment. Obviously, not started the season particularly well. Obviously, the defeat earlier on. They're currently on 13 points, so they're 2 behind Bayern now. Currently sat in 4th. Obviously, in the Champions League as well, didn't maybe start in the way that they wanted either. It's kind of a 2-part question, really, in terms of why do you think that maybe is that there's a lot of talk around Wolfsburg at the moment, and what is a success for Wolfsburg this season?
I think it like the kind of shift that is happening at the moment has already begun last season, where we're seeing that Wolfsburg lost both of their league games against Bayern Munich, where you can see that the previous team, that Wolfsburg, they have dominated the league for quite some years, also the DFB Pokal. And then on the other side, we see Bayern, who have this step-by-step plan that they have been working on for quite a few years, where they came closer and closer to the first spot, and then finally took it in the last 2 years. So I think we have gradually been witnessing like a shift in German women's football, where Bayern emerged as the better team, which they still are at the moment. Even though I think they lost against Wolfsburg, I think they're overall still the better team, and will probably come out as the champions again if everything goes to plan. But yeah, as for the reasons, I think Wolfsburg has been missing to react to the shift, to react with good transfers, because when we look at the squad now, they have quite a few old players that are still key players that they can't really play without, like Alexandra Popp, like Marina Hegering, like Katrin Hendrich, like Svenja Huth. They're all 30 or above, so you can see that they will probably in the future, they won't play that many more seasons. So Wolfsburg normally has to already now react to that and bring in new players who can take on their roles. And I think they have had a good transfer with Sarah Linder. I definitely think that's a good one. But with Lynette Bernstein, I don't think she's a good replacement for a player like Eva Pajor, who in general is very hard to replace. But still, I don't think she's like the goal scoring type. I think she's more with technical abilities that she can bring to the team. But I think that, and also another reason is that they're I don't know, the noise around Wolfsburg with Tommy Stroh. There have also been fan reactions that they weren't very happy with the system that he's playing, how he's involving the players also from the bench, the new players. For a time, Jule Brandt it wasn't really. You couldn't see how she was involved, had a very hard time at the beginning when she came to Wolfsburg. And now you also had that shift where Tommy Stroh said he wants to leave at the end of the season. Now he's staying for, I think, 2 more years. So I don't know, it's all a little bit weird, and you don't really see the structure or a clear goal where it's all going. So I think that's what I'm taking away from it.
No, absolutely. I think you summed up pretty well, actually. And you kind of led me on to my question for Liberty, but also Julie Brand. I definitely want to come back to her because I feel like she's another conversation towards the end, potentially, when we're talking about moves and things like that. But Liberty, I'll throw the same kind of questions to you, but also because the last show we did on the Frauen-Bundesliga, we spoke about obviously Tommy Stroh as well, and you were pretty critical, I think, at the time. It's fair to say of him and the style that Wolfsburg were implementing last season in particular. Do you think that's potentially why there's a bit of turbulence? I think I said on the last show that we did that to me from the outside, and Adriana kind of summed this up, that Wolfsburg do seem to be in a bit of transition at the moment. You're going from those kind of the old guard into the new and trying to find a new spine of the team and that kind of thing. Do you think that's kind of where we're at with Wolfsburg now? They're kind of in the middle of that kind of transition, so they're kind of going to be there or thereabouts, but maybe not the team that's been dominating for so long.
Yeah, I mean, losing Eva Pajor was always going to hurt. I think if anyone knows me, even like for about 5 minutes, they know that I think the world of Pajor. For me, she's the best striker in the game. Like at the moment, there is kind of no one who comes close to her. So losing her was always going to be hard. It was just kind of a statement of fact. And I think when you don't have her just kind of banging in goals for no reason and just for fun, you're going to struggle because it makes games tighter. And yeah, I think there is a kind of changing of the guard, but also I think the changing isn't quite there yet. So we're like on this like road I've created now. Like Wolfsburg are slowly coming down the road, and the actual like changing moment of like players like Pop leaving, or these kind of, as you were referencing, like the older players who've been here for a long time, they've not left yet. So we're still going down the road. And once we get to that point, then the actual change will happen. And then there's like progression. But I think it's kind of it's a slow progress, but I don't think Wolfsburg's transfers are matching up with what they want, and it just feels like lost and muddled, and nothing really makes sense. Whereas someone like Bayern's transfers are making sense, and they are kind of in places that they need, or they're matching like for like abilities. Whereas Wolfsburg just kind of haven't hit that kind of sweet spot, and you can't keep toe to toe with someone if they're outperforming you in places like a transfer window. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
No, I think that's a fair way of looking at it. I think I've said this for the last kind of couple of seasons that Bayern, I know we're talking about Wolfsburg, but Bayern's transfer policy, I feel like, have been very, very smart. And I think if you can get that right, recruitment's the hardest thing in football. It's also the most valuable. If you can get that right, eventually that's going to pay off, and you're going to see that over the seasons. It's maybe not going to happen in one season or 2 seasons. You've got to get it right over successive seasons in order to sustain that. I want to come back to Bayern because I feel like we're going to cover Bayern a little bit when we talk about the Champions League. But I want to talk about the team that's top of the table right now in Frankfurt, because they won tonight. So, when we put the tweet out earlier saying they're chasing the top, they were at the time. They since won, so they are now top of the league on 16 points. Bayern are on 15. Adriana, what have you made of Frankfurt so far this season? They've scored 22, conceded 3. So it's a very good record that they're on right now. We've already said, obviously, they beat Wolfsburg already this season, so they've already got one of those games out of the way. And beat them pretty comfortably as well, 3-0 win at home. Do you reckon they've got what it takes to potentially stay in amongst a title race this season and make it a 3-horse race for the title? Where do you kind of see their season going, at the moment?
I definitely hope it will be a race between the 3 teams, which will be the best for the neutral fan to make it more exciting in the title race. But yeah, I think what Frankfurt has been lacking in the past was, I think, consistency in over the whole season. They had really good games, for example, also against Wolfsburg, against Bayern, where they made huge problems for them. But then when it came to smaller teams, mid-table teams, they lost important points. And on the other side, you have a team like Bayern who wins doesn't lose any game of the season, and then it's really hard to compete against that. So even if you can take points away from Bayern, you still lose them against a lower table team. So but this season they haven't lost a single game, only drew once. And have also scored a lot of goals, you have to say. So I think so far they have been very consistent, have also won the difficult games, especially the one against Wolfsburg, I think, was extremely impressive. They played a very high press against them, surprised them, and I think that was a good demonstration of what their potential is. But on the other hand, you can see what is missing when they play in the Champions League quali and then lose against a team like Sporting Lisbon, where they didn't show at all what their potential could be, and didn't look like themselves at all. So I definitely hope that they will continue what they're showing right now, and also show up like that in the next top match against Bayern.
No, absolutely. As you've kind of referenced, as this comment says, they're obviously with no Champions League. That is going to help them a little bit. I think we're going to see that, with teams that are hopefully fighting at the top that don't have Champions League. You do see the benefits of that, not having that midweek. You get a full week to recover. So when you come around to these big games, it is a little bit easier. Michael mentioned you're smiling, Liberty, a bit earlier on, and I feel like you've been waiting for this because as Sander was put there, Frankfurt's attack's been firing compared to last season, especially Freigang. Now she's currently the top scorer, 7-6 in the league so far. Now we spoke about her on the last show we did and her abilities. and everything else. So yeah, same kind of question to you about Frankfurt. And so do you think they can sustain it, to the end of the season? But also a word on Friday, because as I said, top scorer right now, and yeah, clearly on form at the moment.
Yeah, so I do think they can sustain it. I think that they've always been the third place team, like quite traditionally, especially in past couple seasons, especially since like I started watching the league. But it was always like Bayern, Wolfsburg close, and then a little bit of a gap, and then them. So then I think that's the bit that's changing. The gap between the top two and them is closing down, because I think that they've kind of figured it out. I mean, Freigang's an interesting question to me, because some people say, oh, she's a striker, she's a 9. Some people say she's 10. I think she's a 10, and I'm quite adamant on thinking she's a 10. And I think Frankfurt have figured out she's a 10. They play her as a 9 against some opposition when they need a front three, but mainly they play 2 forwards, her, and then a 3 midfield, and then 4 at the back. I think that's the sweet spot. I keep saying sweet spot recently. I don't know why I keep doing it. But her ability to have that space to be the 10 and be deeper in midfield, but then push up and be in and around the forwards in the 9 is, it's just a 9.5. Having that ability though is kind of suited them so well. She kind of knows that that's her role now, and yeah, I think they started it last season, but it wasn't very like set in place kind of thing. It kind of went back and forth between like a traditional 4-3-3 and then this 4-3-1-2. But that's sort of what they've been doing this season. It's what the formation, apologies, they did against Bayern in the cup in the semi-finals, and it really surprised Bayern. And then it ends up going to penalties, and it's Gruns makes all the saves, and it's like kind of Frankfurt's not their day for penalties, but it unsettled. I'm not saying second striker. It unsettled Bayern. I think that's sort of what is needed from a side like Frankfurt. They are really interesting. I mean, other than Freigang, like Nicola Naomi is an excellent forward. I rate her really highly. Reuteler is just like immense, and she can go from being a forward to falling back into midfield with like near ease. I just really like Frankfurt, and I think they've got this season to push even further than they have before. And I think they've figured out what is needed of them to do that. And I think they're going to stick with it instead of kind of this on and off experimentation that they did last season. But yeah, I just like them.
We were kind of talking about this backstage, and I think I kind of said this, that I do like them as a 10. I think, Adrian, I'll throw this question to you just very quickly before we kind of move it on a little bit. Is there anyone else in that Frankfurt team that you want to give a shout out to that's kind of stood out so far this season that maybe people aren't talking about, that maybe is going into the radar a little bit, or is kind of maybe not the big name that's getting all the goals? Is there anyone that's kind of really performing in that team that maybe is not getting mentioned in that same bracket?
Actually, 2 players come to mind. For once, Barbara Dunst, who I think is a really important player when it comes to creativity. And last third, she can score goals, she can assist. She's also really good against the ball, so I think she kind of like can do it all. Her, and also Elisa Sens, who's one of the great transfers that Frankfurt made in the summer next to Nina Lürsen, who I think will also be interesting and important in the future. And Elisa Sens also came into the Germany national team, I think around 1.5 years ago, because she had such a good performance for Leverkusen, where she really had her breakthrough, and she's just so good on the ball, has a really good eye for the other players, and also in the tackles, where even though she's kind of small, she's really good against it. And I think probably Frankfurt's best transfer of the summer.
Interesting. I always like asking that question because it's potentially names that people haven't heard before or aren't aware of, and I think there's definitely players in that team. And it kind of I will ask this question now, actually. So questions to the both of you, just very quickly on this one. How do Frankfurt keep hold of these players? Freigang is a player that I swear every time the transfer window comes around, her name is mentioned, linked to somebody. Yet she's always she's still there for now. Whether that's going to continue for the next 5 years, I don't know. So just a quick fire one for the both of you. How do they keep hold of these kind of players? Because the better they guess, obviously, the more interest is going to be in them. I'm sure that, where Sophia, there was a lot of interest in her, and it looked very much likely that she was going to move away. Obviously, she's still there as well. So I'll do it in reverse all this time. So Liberty, I'll come to you first. How do they keep hold of some of these players, and do you think they will, in terms of some of these names that are getting to that level now where there's a lot of interest in them?
I think being in the top kind of three of the league consistently is obviously the first one. It's easier said than done, because I think there's quite a few of the teams sort of in the 4 to 5, 6 kind of range that can push them, and are pushing them kind of more and more each season. But I think that's the first one. And also just kind of belief. I mean, Freigang is obviously the one that always has the talk. There was the Barcelona, and then there's the tattoo kind of conversation, and then she obviously does renew her contract. And Carmen reminded me earlier that she said that, like, she had a feeling that it would mean more to win at Frankfurt than kind of win at any other club. It's kind of similar to what Viviana Miedema once said about Arsenal, which kind of stings. But I think there's belief in the club at the moment. I think there's a clear vision, and as you've just referenced, like the transfer windows are looking stronger and stronger. And I think if there is belief from the top down that they can keep these players, because they see that the vision's there and that everyone's sort of in it together. And I think sometimes that's all it really needs to keep players, especially big players, that if there is like this equilibrium from the top and the team, that then you feel kind of not invincible, because like you can lose games, but like stronger and together, that you feel like, okay, I can see myself staying here. And then you hold on to big players like Laura Freigang or anyone really. I think the squad is getting to a point now where the bench is as good as the starting 11, and the sort of players that they saw leave at the end of last season have been replaced really well. And I just belief, and then also like pushing in the league and in the cups, and obviously not Champions League this season, but come next season, if they're in a position to be in that conversation again, then pushing through that again. I think being in the Champions League last season definitely helped, because there is sort of the idea that they can do it again. Once again, obviously not this season, but still going forwards, like future seasons, that it is a possibility.
That is good. I don't know whether you'd finish that. That was a proper sudden stop then. Before we move on, and Adriana, same question to yourself in terms of keeping hold of these players, because I mentioned season by season, the interest obviously in these players seem to grow more, particularly from a WSL point of view. I noticed that the links a lot more, particularly in the last kind of 18 months to players from the likes of Frankfurt or Leverkusen and these kinds of teams. Is it enough, do you reckon, to just be kind of in and around the top two and pushing Bayern and Wolfsburg, or do you think they need to maybe can they make that next step and try and keep hold of some of these players? Where's your kind of thinking on this one?
I believe that we see it after the season already, because I think that Frankfurt has made that next step to be in contention for that second place in the table at the end of the season. They have made their point clear. Also, I mean, now they're at the top of the table, which already speaks a lot for them. To add what Liberty said, I definitely agree with the Champions League, like the argument that they have played there last season and were really good, even though they didn't make it to the quarterfinals. And this year also made it to the qualification round, even though they didn't go through to the group stage. But on top of that, from my perspective, it's maybe weird, but it's also just a vibe that this team is giving. The core of the team has been together for quite a few years now. They all know each other. They have created like a family-like atmosphere. They all feel very, very comfortable together when they play. They know where each of them will run, where they stand, how they can play. So I think that's a very one of the arguments that play for them. And also when you look at the example Laura Freigang, I think she just feels very at home in Frankfurt. I think there are many examples for that. And also I think as long as they are successful, they will be able to keep the players. But if they, for example, don't qualify for Champions League for the next season, I think we will probably see a few of them leaving. And I definitely think that Laura Freigang is a player who also wants to see, or wants to experience other international leagues in the future.
No, absolutely. I agree with both. And Lucky's kind of just added this there, that it feels like a bit of a make or break potentially with some players, like whether they're going to be, if they're in the top two potentially, or kind of just missing out on the top two in third. I think that will probably be enough. But if they dropped anywhere below that, then I think some players might have their heads turned, depending on what offers potentially come in for those kind of players as well. So definitely teams keep an eye on. We'll do another one of these shows in about two months' time or so and see where they're at when we get closer to the January transfer window. Not that I expect many of these players to move in January, but we'll see where they are at kind of the midway point. Speaking of, let's move over very quickly to the Champions League that we saw last week. And Bayern Munich versus Arsenal was the game that was hyped up to be the big one. I can't lie to you. I was on a show when this was happening. I left it and it was 1-1. All of a sudden I come back and it's 5-2. So I'm not entirely sure what happened. So I had to go and rewatch that back to find out what did. It turned out Pernilla Harder exists over in Munich, and she's actually quite good at football, believe it or not. So she scored a few. But Adriana, I'll come back to you then first on this one. What happened in this game? How did this end up 5-2, in your opinion? And was this kind of expected in terms of when you looked at it from yourself, obviously over there in Germany? Were Bayern expected to win this one? What was your kind of thoughts going into this?
Definitely not expected. I think going into this game, Bayern had a lot of respect for their opponent. Obviously, Arsenal is a very, very big name. They have a lot of good players, strong and depth in their squad. And when you look back, the last season in the Champions League, where Bayern didn't make it to the quarterfinals, that was quite a big blow for their team, because they want to play among the best teams in Europe, and if they don't even make it to the quarterfinals, that's a huge loss for them. So this year, the big goal is definitely to qualify and make it as fast as possible. And that was the first game where they could lay the groundwork for that aim they're having, and that it works that well. I didn't expect. But I think the game started in the first half as a lot of other games that Bayern played this season, that they didn't quite get very well into the game, conceded the first goal, and then came back even stronger, which we saw against Hoffenheim, for example, and also against Leipzig. And I think Arsenal definitely had their problems with the set pieces, which we already talked about earlier, that it's a huge advantage for Bayern that they have used quite a few times now for, I think, over a year now, and still the opponents can't really control it. Only Wolfsburg apparently. And that's also how Pernille Harder scored her first 2 goals. I think it was both after corners. I think that on the other hand, Arsenal didn't really push back in the second half. I had a feeling they lost a lot of the energy they had in the first half, because I think they had a better start, and that's why I was a little disappointed of them, because I also know, because of their strong squad they have, that they have the quality to hold up the result and push back a little bit, but that I was definitely missing in the second half.
No, absolutely. I can see, Liberty, you were not enjoying this not enjoying this conversation as much being over there. But how did you see the game? Because obviously Arsenal go 1-0 up, and to be fair, at that point I did fear for Bayern. I agree with what Adriana said about Bayern last season in the Champions League. I did, although it was a ridiculously tough group that Bayern had, I thought it was a massive disappointment that they didn't make it through. Obviously the groups, kind of on that mental final game in the group that kind of swung back and forth with various different outcomes. Bayern have not got that much of an easier group this time around either, obviously with Juventus in there as well. So picking up this win from a Bayern point of view was, for me, massively important, because I feel like if they would have lost their away at Juventus this week, that would have put a lot of pressure on this one. How did you kind of see the game? Because obviously, Adriana just spoke about the set pieces and things like that. What was your kind of thoughts on it overall? And obviously we know that I want to talk about Pernille Harder as a separate conversation, actually, so I'll kind of leave her out of it for now. But yeah, what did you make of the game overall? And kind of, I'm not. I can't imagine you're going to say this was expected, but what's your kind of thoughts on it overall?
Not expected. No, I don't think anyone really looks at a game like Bayern Munich versus Arsenal and thinks it's going to end 5-2. I agree with quite a few of the comments saying that Arsenal had a good first half and sort of just collapsed. But I think from a Bayern point of view, that I know you've just said we'll talk about Harder separately, but I think the team overall saw that sort of collapse and just sort of ran with it and just thought, if we can feed her, she's got this confidence now, then she can just go and just keep going. And I
don't think that's just me, Adriana, is it? It's definitely not, is it?
Oh, she's back.
There's point.
I don't think she is.
We lost her.
Mute.
All I heard was mute. It's like trying to communicate with someone up in space. This is.
So I was
The thing is, her internet is lagging that much. I can't even mute her.
Game on the train.
I got train. That's all I got from that.
Yeah. Oh, is everyone back?
I don't think so. You're definitely not on ours. Whether you can see or hear us, I don't know. But right, I'll come back to Liberty. What I'll do, I'll take her out of the stream for a second and add her back in when I can see that the picture's caught back on. I can't remember what I was. I want to ask you obviously about Pernille Harder then for a second, because obviously she made the 3-goal impact in the second half. How big of an impact has she made at Bayern? Because, her and Magda obviously made that move over to Bayern, settled in pretty well. I think it looks from the outside and obviously performing on the pitch as well. How big of an impact has she made on this Bayern team and kind of her role in the setup that they're playing at the moment?
Yeah, I think it has obviously made very big waves when she came to Bayern in the beginning. Obviously, she's one of these star players of the past years. Was, I think, Europe's Footballer of the Year for 2 times. And obviously also came together with Magdalena Eriksson, who both are like these great personalities in women's football, and definitely brought a lot of star power to Bayern, and also, I believe, recognition among other European teams and European fans that they noticed that Bayern is building up something. They're planning to really attack the top spots in European football. And as for her impact on the playing style at Bayern, I think she has incredible technical abilities. She has played as a striker, as a 10 for Bayern on the wings. Even though I think she's still at her best playing as a 10. But yeah, has scored goals, has assisted, and I think just overall brought a lot of quality to the Bayern attack, and can hold the balls, can also win goals against the defenders with a high press. And sometimes she had a little bit of difficulties with injuries, which set her back a little bit. But you could also tell she was missing from Bayern's game, and when she was back again, that was an immediate impact. And I think now, since January, she has been injury-free, and you can really tell that her performance has been even to an even better level. And even though she hasn't scored in the Champions League, I think season last year, it was her first 3 goals for Bayern, actually, against Arsenal. She also said in the press conference before the game that it isn't all about the goals, but also on how you play for the team. And I think that's exactly what she has been doing for Bayern. She has been a team player, and through that has also gotten to her chances and her goals in the end, which is the best for everyone in the end.
No, absolutely. I mean, well, that trio of kind of your pivot of Stanway and Zadrazil, and then Harder just in front of that in the 10 position. Well, I've said this for a while that people who know me, my kind of entry into women's football, Pernille Harder was one of the first players I watched and just went, okay, that's an unbelievable footballer. Back when she was, at Wolfsburg before she went to Chelsea, that was one of the first players I looked at and was like, yeah, that's an unbelievable talent right there. Right, Liberty, we think you're back with us. So if you want to give that another go and talk to us about your thoughts on Pernille Harder and her impact on this team as well.
I would like to apologise. I'm really not sure what happened there, and it was like I could see, but I couldn't be heard.
This was the best comment. This was top tier, I thought.
I like that her internet is like Jonas's coaching, erratic. It is. It is pretty erratic. I think I feel about Pernille Harder at Bayern Munich the same way I felt about her at Chelsea, which is sort of echoing what I've just heard. The bit I heard, I didn't hear the beginning, unfortunately, because internet. But when she's fit and with the squad, she's excellent. And when she's not fit, you can sense it and you can feel it. There's sort of like not a hole, but like a slight void of like a Harder in the corner. And I thought the same at Chelsea. There was that season, obviously not last season, her last season, so not the one just gone, the one before, where she was away for quite a while with injury, and Chelsea had a Harder void. But the same nature as Bayern and Chelsea is that they have players that can do that role and can be there when she can't be there, but it's not the same. I think a lot of the time we talk about Pernille Harder and we say, oh yeah, she's one of the best. She's one of the best in the game, but we never actually like get to a point where we actually are like, no, this is why. It's just kind of like a thing that's said. But I think she took her moment against Arsenal, and she kind of had it. The English commentary was going on about how she'd never scored in the Champions League for Bayern Munich, and you kind of go, "Oh, it's going to come now, isn't it?" Like fate, you've tempted it. I think it was Michael McCann. Michael, you've tempted fate, and it happened. And yeah, she just had confidence, and she just was kind of like, "Well, I can." And also, there's the Chelsea Arsenal narrative, blah blah blah. But I think she's absolutely incredible. I think Bayern this season have figured out how to get the best of her. After it takes like a new transfer, it takes like a season to fit in properly, but I think it's come right at the right time. And I think as much as we spoke about the Wolfsburg game and how it was like an anomaly, I do think that it will just be hunger. And I would hate to be Juve this week purely because that's going to be hellish. But I think, yeah, you hit if you're someone like Pernille Harder, like you've played the game for a long time. She's very experienced and very, very talented. And it's just kind of another tool in the Bayern shed that they can call on, and they can kind of rotate and be different in places, and they're unpredictable. And I think her unpredictability of how she can score and kind of different types of goals also helps them. And yeah, for an ex Chelsea player, I always have a soft spot for Pernille Harder, and it like hurts sometimes to talk about her too much because I'm like, she was at Chelsea, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, yeah, okay, I was going to say they're Arsenal, and then it felt like too much, so then I stopped myself and had to say Shed instead, but I was going to say it, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to say it.
I think you did pretty well there. My kind of last question on Bayern, and I want to kind of wrap this show up with one final question on the league itself, but what is a success for Bayern this season? Obviously, we mentioned the league back-to-back wins in the league. Not quite managed to topple Wolfsburg in the cup over the last, is it 10 in a row now Wolfsburg are on in the cup or something like that? So, Adriana, for you, what is classed as a success again for Bayern this season? Obviously, defending the title, I think will definitely be up there. But do you think they need something else this season to make it more success? Well, obviously, it would be on paper a more successful season. But do you think they need that to maybe satisfy fans and media? Where do you kind of put them in terms of their own expectations?
Well, they definitely have to defend the title. That's kind of like a given. They have to do it again a third time in a row now. On top of that, of course, the cup isn't the most important competition, but still it's like the last thing they haven't taken from Wolfsburg yet. Where Wolfsburg is still like the winner who has won it for the last 10 years. So that's like, that would be more like I think prestige win in the end of the season. And of course, for the Champions League, they must make it out of the group stage. There's no other option really. And of course, they also don't want to stop at the quarterfinals. So I think realistically, the goal is semi-final, even though they will, if you ask Alex Strauss, he will probably say he wants to see it step by step and then see how it turns out. But yeah, definitely think that they have to make the Champions League semi-final to call it a success in the end. And I think that's already also why it's important that they have to get the first spot in the group to not get one of the big clubs already in the quarterfinals, so they have a better chance to make it past them.
No, absolutely. I think I would like to see it. Obviously, people know my soft spot and for Alex Strauss, actually. I really like him as a coach, and now having watched the documentary even more as a person just watching through those episodes. For people who haven't watched it, you can go and find that. I don't know why I'm plugging that for them. Like they need me plugging that for them, but you can watch it on the Bayern YouTube channel anyway, which is a very interesting watch. I kind of wish more clubs would do it. I can see why clubs don't do things like that, but I would like to see it a little bit more. Liberty, for yourself, what's a success for Bayern, do you think, this season?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Defend the title, win the cup. Or at least get to the final. I think that's kind of a set sort of thing. Probably win it though. Be in it. I think the final last season was a bit of an anomaly. I watched it and thought this is a bit. It felt fate for Wolfsburg, and then also felt it just was a very strange game in my eyes. So I think being a bit more in that and being a bit more themselves, I feel maybe sometimes they're a little bit less like themselves in those big games, especially with like league rivals instead of like Champions League. And then get out the group stage in the Champions League, quarterfinals, get through the quarterfinals. Obviously, didn't do that last season. Didn't get to the quarterfinals at all. Season before, were beat by Arsenal. But I think, get to semi-finals and maybe push even further, because I do think they have the ability to. They're one of the teams where I'd go, I could see them in the final. I think they could beat any opposition on their day in the lead up to the final, and I think they just kind of have to do that now. I think they've recruited well to get to that point where that's a possibility, and it's just doing it. But kind of the league is kind of the bare minimum at this point for them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think, like I said, when you look at the list of finals, that's 10 in a row for Wolves, and they're clearly well drilled and know how to win that when it comes to that cup. I tend to agree. As I said, I would expect Bayern to be kind of there or thereabouts. I think they'll get through the group. Whether that's first or second, I've still not decided. Depends what happens this week in Turin. But I definitely think they will retain the title, I think. I've not quite decided. Ask me in a few months and I'll decide on that one, because again, I'm a little bit torn on that one. Going from the title to the bottom, and I'll wrap this show up with this question. I don't know whether either of you have kind of got an answer to this one or not. In terms of relegation from the league, in terms of where we think that is heading. So Potsdam are at the moment on 0. They're the only team without. And you've also got Cologne as well. Adriana, where are you kind of leaning towards in terms of a relegation for this season?
Yeah, I mean, this year it's an interesting one, because only one team gets relegated. Because next year we will have 2 more teams competing in the Frauen-Bundesliga. So 3 teams moving up from the second Frauen-Bundesliga. Obviously, Karl Zeiss Jena and Turbine Potsdam just made it up from the second league. So far, what I've been seeing from Jena has actually been quite promising. They seem to have a clear plan of how they want to play, that they actually want to have the ball, and also have had their chances, have only reached 1 point, but actually I think realistically could have gotten more out of it if they had conceded less goals and been a little more efficient in attack. But on the other side, from Potsdam, I've been quite disappointed, because they don't have a lot of structure, and to keep up the game for how their style of play for all of the game. Most of the time it only lasts for like half an hour, and then they kind of fall apart, and at the same time are not really strong in their goal efforts. They haven't scored any goals so far, which obviously is very disappointing, but also I haven't seen a lot of development since the first game until the 6th game now. So will be they also have set in a new coach, so we will see if that maybe will change things in the upcoming games. But probably also the international break now will come in handy for them. But if it goes on like this, I don't really see like a big chance for Potsdam.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. I think yourselves and the Sander was just put there. They've conceded 19 already, and yet to score. They're the only team in the league that hasn't scored yet. Obviously down there on 0 points. I mean, Liberty, you kind of. I realise I asked this question just as you took a drink, so I'll delay the question a little bit. Is that kind of where you're leaning towards? That there's probably not going to be too much change there. At the bottom of the table.
Yeah, I agree. The nature of the DAZN deal in the UK means that not many of the kind of bottom teams are shown ever unless they're playing Bayern or Wolfsburg. Quite often they don't even play Frankfurt's games. That's like it has to be quite a big occasion for them to play them. Or if they've got like another international league, the games are a bit worse. They play Frankfurt, so I can't say I've actually watched too many games, but I did see was it the first game of the season, the Potsdam Bayern game? And yeah, I thought it was a shame it started the way it did, because you kind of want your first game back in the league to be a bit easier. First off, you don't want to be playing the reigning champions your first game back in the league, just because it's harder that way for you. But yeah, I didn't think they looked scared. And I think if you're starting on a sort of worse foot, then you kind of carry that on. And yeah, unfortunately, I think that's probably how it's going to end. It changes the sort of conversations around not the bottom spot, but the kind of ones around it, especially as we go further into the season and kind of go into sort of March, April, pushing onwards this like next year, because then do you see teams kick on? Because if you don't, and there is just kind of one team sort of sat at the bottom, then you kind of get a situation that we have in the WSL where there is only one relegation spot every season, and then teams sort of in and around it don't care as long as they're not the worst team. And I fear that if we have a situation like that in the Frauen-Bundesliga this season, that it could really harm the league and its integrity, because every league wants every team to care and to invest in their women's team and push for better. But if there's no fear of relegation for two teams, what does that do? I know it's a sort of a one-off and we have the 3 promotions, but it does leave questions around what the end of this season could look like and pushing forwards in sort of the end of the season, especially when you think we'll have the January transfer window in that time. What do they do then if they're sort of comfortable towards the bottom but not at the bottom? It just leaves questions, and it unsettles me. I don't like it as a thought, but I think it needs mentioning, because it does maybe harm the league unintentionally. Whilst they want to grow the league by expanding, then maybe they have to accidentally do harm beforehand, and it's just food for thought.
Short-term pain, long-term gain, I think is the phrase you're after there when you talk about it like that. One final question, because I've just seen this come in. Andrew, I don't know whether you know that, or both of you know. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Don't know whether either of you two do, whether they're still fully professional or not. I remember reading something about this. I can't remember though.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you define fully professional in that case, because in not all Bundesliga teams that you play, the clubs pay them enough to actually make a living out of it. So if you define it like that, then they're probably not like professional. But other than that, I think they have been in the first division for quite some time. I mean, they're one of the traditional clubs in Germany that have won the Champions League in the past. So they they have the structure in when you think about it, but I'm not quite sure how that's like when it comes to semi-professional, professional, how it looks like.
Yeah, I think semi-pro is definitely the thing. And as you mentioned, I didn't even mention that actually when I asked the question, but this is a team with ridiculous history. When you're looking at, going back, as you mentioned, the Champions League and league winners as well, like numerous times. And this is we're not talking 30, 40 years ago. We're talking within the last decade, well, just over a decade now, kind of between 10 and 15. We're not talking that long ago, really, in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, it is a shame there. But as you mentioned, obviously, maybe should have mentioned that at the start as well, that not every single team is fully professional as it would be in the WSL, for example. It's slightly different from that point of view. Right, we'll look to wrap it up because we're going for an hour. I said to these girls, so it'll be about 30, 40 minutes. I'm always over on time when I do these things. Before we wrap up, Adriana, is there anything you want to shout out firstly? Anything, your Twitter or anything else that you want people to go and follow or find any of your work that you're doing?
Sure. My Twitter handle is Adriana W2000. So feel free to follow to get to know even more about German women's football. I tweet in English and in German, just how I'm feeling at the moment. And other than that, can also recommend 90 Min Germany website where you can find really good articles about the Women's Bundesliga.
No, absolutely. So make sure you go and check in those two out. I'll put that in the description so you can easily find those. Liberty, for yourself, is there anything you want to shout out while you're on here?
My Twitter is just Liberty Simons, like the boy's name with an S on the end. But yeah, I mean, I would like to indirectly shout out a 90 Min piece I read this morning that Carmen wrote about the German squad, that like her predictions. I thought was excellent. It is in German. I said this when I tweeted about it. Just put it through Google Translate. Most of the time, it's pretty correct. I don't speak a lick of German. Anything I read that's not in English has gone through German. German? Jesus, sorry. Google Translate. But yeah, I recommend that. It was really, really good. It's an interesting thought, especially because the announcement will be tomorrow. And yeah, I just wrote a piece that you'll find on my Twitter about 5 underrated stars to watch out for in the Champions League this season. That you might want to. There's a Bayern player in my selections, so it's relevant. I won't say who because you have to read it.
I guess, is there a Hammarby player in here? I've not read it yet, so.
There's two Hammarby players, and I stopped myself at 2, else I could have done. Rob tweeted me earlier saying, would I talk about Hammarby in this? There's my Hammarby reference. I don't know if Rob's watching, but I'm going to tell him I managed to get Hammarby in here somewhere. It wasn't even me. But yes, there's 2 Hammarby players, Bayern player. I won't say who because you'll have to read it to find out who. A Twente player and a Celtic player, and also a manager.
Well. That's a really good Celtic shout.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, you'll have to go read it to find out who, but it's towards the top of my Twitter because it only got published today. But yes, I would shout that out as my thing. And also go read Carmen's German squad predictions because that was also excellent.
There you go. A few things to go and follow and to find. As I said, I've literally just clicked on it and scrolled through, and there's some really good shouts in here. So I'm going to have to give a proper read of that once I come off here. Thank you, both of you, for coming on, talking all about Frauen-Bundesliga. It's no point me doing this show on my own because I wouldn't be a very good one. So thankfully, these 2 wonderful people were able to join me this evening to talk all about it. And hopefully, for those of you who maybe don't watch the league as much, have learned maybe a little bit. You might have learned nothing. You might be a Frauen-Bundesliga expert, in which case you've heard us give our opinions over the last hour or so, but you may have learned something if not. So thank you to everyone in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you're liking this video and subscribing if you haven't already. I think Barry's back on Wednesday with a lower league show. I don't know who it is next Monday. It's either Beth or Laura. I think next Monday, I might have just thrown them under the bus and it might be me. Either way, we'll be back next Monday regardless at 8:30. Have a good week all. See you guys in the next one.